Alrighty, Monday morning, barely hours before release, leaving this one a bit late, but, life gets in the way of, life. Anyways, pinned comment for all the usual YouTube shite. Also, check out the second channel where I'm going to be posting the full, complete books in one video. One handy-dandy video. So, check the second channel. It's in the description. Clickety-click, click, click, click. And yeah, just a quick shout-out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Fudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Ithilia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. Anyways, on to the story. All about the Linmeads, Part 17. Timing. Linmeads in a given family group have a slightly different sleeping schedules. One person may be an early riser, another stays up very late, while a third one may wake for a few hours in the middle of the night for no discernible reason. This ensures that someone is awake at all times in any given family group, which ensures that they are less likely to be caught unaware by a crackmore. It also makes for ideal watch and guard schedules if there are any Linmeads on the expedition team. Be sure to take their schedule into account when setting a watch list. Dubiuk Review of Ontological Species Studies, all about Linmeads, timing. Published by Glass and Steel, all about Linmeads. Translation Engine 3.1415. They sat in the dark, Fubsy draped across Zoe's lap, purring and working her claws in and out. After a long time, one of the cabin doors opened and Captain Rackham stepped out into the main cabin. He moved easily through the dark, heading towards the outer hatch of the ship. After sitting so long in the dark, Nerev's eyes were well adjusted to the lack of light, and she could see him reach his hand out for the electronic lock. "Captain Rackham," Zoe said, and the captain froze. Zoe slid the lights up, and Captain Rackham turned to face him. "Zoe, Nerev Fubsy, I didn't realize that the girls' cabin was actually going to be the main cabin," he said. Zoe tapped her compad, and the door of the other cabins opened, and Nate, Quirf, Alan, and Teref came out of their quarters. "The captain was just about to explain why he was sneaking out of the ship in the middle of the night," Zoe said. Captain Rackham drew himself up. "I was not sneaking out. I was going out in a quiet and respectful manner so as to not wake up everyone on the ship." He looked around at the assembled team, and Fubsy yawned, showing all of her teeth. "Clearly, that did not work out as I planned, but I was not sneaking," he said with a great dignity. "So, what exactly were you doing?" Nate said. He looked relaxed, leaning against the wall with his arms closed. The captain sighed. "I was just thinking about what if Teref said about not being able to scan the cone. I wanted to take a look at it and see if I could figure out how important it was. If it looks all that important, we could determine if there's a way to take it back with us." "And you felt the urge to do this now?" Zoe asked. Captain Rackham shrugged. "I was awake. I was preying on my mind. Why not now?" "Well then," Zoe said brightly, "let's go take a look." "Now?" Captain Rackham asked, and then held up his hand. "Wait, I know. Why not now?" They went outside the ship and looked at the code attached to the front. Normally, FTL drives were based on a large parabolic dish in the back and pointed away from the ship. This ship had that as well, but it also had a much smaller parabolic dish attached to the nose of the ship, also pointing away from the body of the ship. The ship was lying on its side, but the nose cone was still a ways up in the air. Nerev tried to scan it with her compad, but couldn't get a scan to load, and when something did happen, the images were interlaced and unreadable. Nate looked at the compad results over her shoulder. "Huh," he said. "What is it?" Nerev asked. "It looks like what happens to equipment during a solar flare," he said. Quirf was distracted from trying to scan the code and looked up at Nate. "Might is a solar flare, because if that's what it sounds like, it does not sound good." Nate shrugged. "Our sun does this thing every few years where it shoots out a bunch of radiation, and it messes things up." Quirf cocked his head. "Things?" "Computers, electronics, power lines, radios." Nate grinned a little. "Things." "And humans just live with that?" Quirf asked. "Well, it's not like we had a lot of options," Nate said. "Yeah, Deathworld, I get it." "So, are you saying that the planet star has flares like yours does?" Captain Rackham asked. "I don't think so, Nerev. Do you mind?" Nate held his hand out for Nerev's compad. He took a few steps back and pointed the compad at the river delta. It scanned fine. He pointed it at the dune. It scanned fine. He pointed it at the nose cone, and it fritzed. Nate handed the compad back to Nerev. So you're saying Steve's ship has a solar flare in its nose, Quirrell said. No, not a solar flare in its nose. That would be silly, Nate said. More like it acts like a solar flare. What's the difference? Quirrell asked. Well, one's silly and the other's plausible, Nate said. If, you do some hand-waving, he said with another grin and a vague gesture with his hand. So, since the instruments don't work well around it, does that mean that it's a cloaking device? Tariff asked. Captain Rackham rolled his eyes. It's not a cloaking device, he said. When you're scanning for something, you find nothing. That's a cloaking device. When you're scanning for something and you find an interference signal, that's something, and it makes you take a second look. So, do you want to bring it with us? Zoe asked Captain Rackham. Your charter, your choice. Captain Rackham shook his head. I don't see how we can carry that and the FTL drive. Let's just stick with the FTL drive. Bubsy rubbed up against Nerev's knee and then yawned. So, we're leaving it here. Does that mean we can all go back to bed? Neref asked. Zoe lifted an eyebrow in the direction of the captain. We can, he agreed. They all headed back into the ship, though Neref noticed that Nate wanted to make sure that he was the last one in. If there were any further telepathic glances between Nate and Zoe, Neref didn't see them. Everybody went back to bed. Or so it seemed. And Neref fell asleep with Bubsy stretched out next to her. Bubsy reached out one long leg and touched Neref's face with her paw, as she was falling asleep. In the morning, Bubsy took it on herself to wake Neref with another face boop. Neref scrubbed her face and yawned, shaking her head. She looked at Zoe a little grumpily. How can you seem perfectly fine after being up in the middle of the night? Neref asked. Zoe laughed. Humans need sleep, don't get me wrong, but we can deal with a certain amount of sleep disruption. What Nate said last night about the radiation from your star, was that true? Neref asked. Zoe paused in putting on her boots and looked at Neref. Sure. Why? Do you think that nose cone thing is spitting radiation on us? Neref asked. Zoe shook her head. That was one of the things Tariff checked for yesterday, when he did his initial scan. Then why does Nate think that the nose cone is like a solar flare? Tariff asked, hugging Bubsy for a moment for comfort. First, who knows why Nate does anything? Second, he didn't say that it was a solar flare, just that it affected our instruments the way a solar flare does, Zoe said. When they went out to the main cabin, Tariff was laying out breakfast, and Quirrell and Alan and Nate were already eating. Nice of you to join us, Nate said, but guess who isn't joining us this morning? Zoe glanced at Captain Rackham's cabin, and the door was open. That rat bastard, she said, and her tone was almost admiring. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.